This is the Razer Hovertrax 2.0. It is one of the few balance scooters on the market that is offered by an American company. Although it is still made in China, in the 2 years I have owned this scooter, have had no mechanical problems apart from slight battery degradation. There's no way to prevent against it. It happens with all battery operated products. In this video, I'm going to discuss how to ride the Hovertrax, its anatomy, how it compares to the figures on paper, and a list of pros and cons. I must first emphasize that this is a balance scooter. Anyone who's seen Back to the Future knows hoverboards don't have wheels. To get started, simply press the power button. Press it again twice if you want to get out of trainer mode. Notice that unlike other balance scooters, the Hovertrax is perpetually leveling itself. I like this because it makes it easier to get on and off and the unit isn't tripping over itself. To get on the Hovertrax, step with your dominant foot and then with your non-dominant. If you're a newbie, it may be more helpful to figure out how to remain stationary before you do anything else. This is not a Segway. There is absolutely no leaning involved in this process. The typical learning curve is 5 to 15 minutes, but it took me 3. Controlling the Hovertrax requires that you tilt the foot platforms using your feet. Tilt them both in the same direction, you'll go straight. Tilt them in opposite directions, you'll spin in place. Also notice that the Hovertrax doesn't care whether you're on it backwards or forwards. It works exactly the same either way. When the Hovertrax is powered on, do not pick it up. Its perpetual leveling will cause the motors to spin until you hold it level. The manual warns about this, so any resulting injury is entirely your fault. The Hovertrax's anatomy is comprised of LED strips, float platforms, a rubber bumper, dual 350-watt hub motors, a battery indicator, a power button, a charging port, the holographic UL2272 certification sticker, completely unnecessary warning labels, and a 36-volt battery that is replaceable. It may not look like it, but the Hovertrax is actually quite heavy, weighing approximately 25 pounds. Nearly all of said weight is carried in the hub motors. Range is ambiguous. Razer says that the Hovertrax will last about 60 minutes. All other manufacturers have range measured as a function of distance, not time. Supposedly, if you go at the top speed of 8 miles per hour for 1 hour, that gives you a range of 8 miles. Au contraire, range depends on multiple factors, including but not limited to weight and how you drive it. Let's just say I'm a 23-year-old man who weighs about 165 pounds and doesn't drive this thing conservatively. There have been times where I've ridden this thing not continuously and have gotten a cumulative more than 60 minutes. My local park has a 40-acre lake with a path encircling it. I've been able to take the Hovertrax around the path 2 to 3 times at about 6 miles per hour, lasting 36 minutes or so. If I weighed less and the days were cooler, perhaps I could go for longer. Speaking of weight, the weight limit is 220 pounds, as is the case with most other balance scooters. I would advise against riding a balance scooter unless you weigh less than that. Otherwise, you would not be able to enjoy the scooter properly or could fracture the torsion bar. The Hovertrax is quiet, but the hum of the motor still exists. It's much louder on hardwood. When the Hovertrax's battery is running low, you will notice a decrease in performance, and when it gets critical, it will start beeping at you. This is the point where you should immediately get off the scooter. Otherwise, it could shut down in the middle of you riding it, causing you to fall. To recharge the Hovertrax, simply plug in the AC adapter into your wall, remove the rubber cap on the Hovertrax's charging port, match the prongs on the charging cable to the charging port, and wait approximately 5 hours. The manual says you must recharge at least for 4 hours and at most for 24 hours, regardless of what the indicators say. Let's move on to pros and cons, starting with the cons. Con number 1 is that this thing is not off-road capable. It is best suited for use indoors or on surfaces no rougher than an asphalt road. This is because the Hovertrax's tires are made of solid rubber, which means they have less give than if they were filled with air. Consequently, you will hear and feel every bump in the road. Clearing gaps and transitions greater than 1 centimeter may prove difficult or even impossible. Either way, it's inconvenient. Traversing incline surfaces are also difficult, ergo I find this thing most entertaining when you're on a flat surface or indoors. Perhaps the most annoying problem I have with the Hovertrax is that the foot platforms create pressure points. Most balance scooters have large, square foot platforms, whereas the Hovertraxes are semi-elliptical. I have relatively big feet, so my footprint may exceed the anti-slip pad regardless. Due to all of this, and the fact that I have really tight hamstrings, I usually get sore after about 15 minutes of continuous riding. I believe this makes it clear that Razer designed this scooter with kids mostly in mind, not adults. I already mentioned how heavy the Razer Hovertrax is, but when you're not using it, or worse, when your battery dies, transportation can be a nightmare. You're supposed to carry it from the torsion bar, which is thankfully thin enough to be carried from, however, good luck finding a comfortable position. You're also less one hand. Other companies like Swagtron put a carrying handle on their T6 model. The Swagtron T3 also had a Velcro carrying strap on the bottom of the torsion bar. If I'm not mistaken, Swagtron released the T3 before Razer released the Hovertrax 2.0. Why Razer didn't incorporate this innovation later on is beyond me. It also doesn't make sense to me that this isn't a feature more common on balance scooters today. Perhaps Razer could also try patenting some hypothetical folding mechanism, not dissimilar to a folding UAV. Another big problem I have is not Razer's fault. Some places where you would most realistically use a balance scooter don't even allow them. For instance, Kansas State University's Engineering Hall explicitly prohibits them, as made clear on the front door. Johnson County Community College doesn't allow balance scooters at all, even outdoors. I used to live at Kansas State's Weffield Hall. For the first 2 months, I rode my Hovertrax in and out of the building and no one batted an eye. Most importantly, it was not against the rules. Despite that, and the fact that I had done nothing to provoke the staff, they started saying I couldn't ride it. Knowing the rules were on my side, I chose to defy. However, they literally invented new rules. Even though it didn't exist in the handbook, they said I couldn't ride wheeled vehicles. They even threatened to fine me under this new made-up rule. In the end, I just gave up. And now we have a very sour relationship. Seriously, why can't things be like the way they used to be during the whole balance scooter craze? Everyone was riding them in the malls and wherever else until our pathological obsession with safety came in. It has made us weak, bored, and boring. My last gripe is that the Razer Hovertrax is an old model. It has been at least around since 2016, and not much innovation has occurred since then. Apparently, you can't even buy it new directly from the Razer website anymore. All that's left are the non-standard variants, the 1.5, which is exclusively designed for children, and the Deluxe 2.0, which is just a standard 2.0 with slightly faster motors, fancier lighting, more visually appealing skins, and an inappropriate price tag. Now onto the pros. First thing, it actually works. As I said at the beginning of this video, I have had absolutely no problems in the 2 years I have owned this Hovertrax. It may not have many features, but it does everything a balance scooter should do. Remember the Swagtrons I mentioned earlier? Although they have more features, no amount of features can make up for the amount of quality assurance issues they are known to have. This is sadly the case with most balance scooters on the market, as most of them are made by Chinese companies who do not share the same desire for quality assurance. All they want is your money, not for you to be satisfied. This brings me to my second pro, which is that Razer is an American company, one that has a long and reputable history in making scooters and just so happens to own the inventor's patent. I am confident that Razer will improve the Hovertrax in the near future and not just let it be a simple cash grab. My last pro is that it is very visually appealing in my opinion. The design of the shell is very complex and unique, and is not so simple compared to other balance scooters. Having the Razer logo on the hub motor clearly identifies that the product is a Razer, and I also like the color selection. I managed to get this one in purple, but if I really wanted to, I could get a green one. Other manufacturers usually just have the boring black, white, blue, red, and sometimes not even that. In conclusion, it is an excellent entry-level balance scooter that has served me well. However, my needs have changed. I need something that I can ride for long periods of time without getting sore, and something that's all-terrain, so I can have reason to use it in the environments I will realistically be more often in. I could take my chances on a Swagtron T6, but I don't want to deal with any QA or technical support. I have therefore decided I'm going to sell my Hovertrax and save up for a Segway Lumo. The Hovertrax still has a special place in my memory, and it will be missed.